You know, some speeches can change laws. Others can start whole movements. But what about a speech that's so powerful, so dangerous, that it gets the speaker killed right then and there? And not only that, but it kicks off a chain reaction that literally changes the course of history. Well, today we're going to dive into exactly one of those speeches.
So, picture this. You're in a courtroom in ancient Jerusalem. A guy named Stephen, who's a pretty big deal in this brand new Christian movement, is on trial for his life. For his life. He's been accused of blasphemy, and he's standing in front of the Sanhedrin. Think of it as the Supreme Court of the nation. The stakes, they're as high as they get. So what does he do? What does he say?
The high priest looks him in the eye and asks, "Are these charges true?" Now you'd expect a simple no, right? A straightforward defense. But that's not what Stephen does. Not even close. Instead, he launches into this long-winded history lesson. A story that, by the way, every single person in that room already knows by heart. But here's the thing. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a trap.
Okay, so this is where things get really clever. Stephen kicks off his so-called defense by just retelling the sacred history of his own people. He's not talking about himself at all. He's telling their story, a story they absolutely cherish. And this is just a brilliant move tactically. By starting with something they all agree on, he gets them all nodding along, you know? They have absolutely no idea where he's taking them.
So he begins with Abraham, the father of their nation. Standard stuff. But then he gets to Joseph, and, this is where you can start to see what he's up to. He doesn't just talk about how great Joseph was. No, he specifically brings up that Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. Then he moves on to Moses, and again, he highlights how Moses was rejected at first by the very people he was sent to deliver. You starting to see a pattern emerge here?
And this is really the core of his whole argument. He is so methodical, so deliberate. He's laying out this historical pattern of rejection, of rebellion, and the genius part is that he's using their heroes and their scriptures against them to build this case that they just can't escape. He's basically saying, hey guys, look at our history. We have this really terrible habit of rejecting the people God sends to help us.
And he just keeps going. He's not done yet. He reminds them that even after Moses worked all these miracles and led them out of Egypt, what did the people do? They turned on him. They built a golden calf, for crying out loud. They rejected their leader and their God, right there in the wilderness. So this pattern of rebellion, Stephen is arguing, isn't just a one-off thing. It's like the darkest thread woven all the way through their entire history.
All right, so here's the turning point. After he so patiently laid out this entire historical foundation, one that they can't argue with, it's their own story, Stephen makes this incredible pivot. The history lesson? It's over. The defense? Gone. He drops the act and becomes the prosecutor. He stops talking about the past, and he turns and points right at the very men who are sitting there judging him.
And boom, this is the moment the whole room just explodes. He calls them stiff-necked people, which in their culture is a massive insult. It means you're stubborn, you're rebellious against God. He looks them dead in the eye and says, you are just like your ancestors, the same ones who sold Joseph into slavery, the same ones who rejected Moses. See, the trap is sprung. He held up their sacred history like a mirror, and now he's forcing them to see their own reflection in it.
Then he lays it all out, charge by devastating charge. This is the knockout punch of his whole argument. He's accusing them of being the final and, frankly, the ugliest chapter in this long, sad story of rebellion. He says, look, your ancestors persecuted the prophets? Sure. But you guys, right here in this room, you did something even worse. You betrayed and murdered the very one all those prophets were talking about. He's basically telling them, you think you're guardians of the law? No, you're its greatest violators.
So as you can probably guess, this does not go over well. The trial just completely falls apart. We're done with legal arguments. There's no more debate. All that's left in the room is this raw, white-hot fury, crashing against this really strange, sudden sense of peace coming from Stephen.
The original text says they gnashed their teeth at him. Can you just picture that? It's pure, almost animal-like rage. But while these powerful men are just losing it, consumed by all this hate, Stephen's attention goes somewhere else entirely. He stops looking at them. He looks up. And then he says the one thing that will absolutely seal his fate. He looks up and says, look, I see heaven open. And he claims to see Jesus, the very person they condemned for blasphemy, standing in the place of highest honor, right next to God. For the council, that's it. That's the last straw. It's the ultimate blasphemy, and he just said it right to their faces.
And what happens next is just a complete breakdown of any kind of order. They literally cover their ears like they can't even bear to hear another word. They start yelling at the top of their lungs just to drown him out. And then the entire court all at once rushes him. The trial's over. Mob justice has taken over. So yeah, the trial was officially done. But the verdict wasn't delivered by a judge. It was delivered by that angry mob. They just skipped all legal procedures, dragged Stephen right out of the city, and got ready to execute him, right then and there, by stoning.
But in these last moments, with stones literally flying at him, Stephen doesn't curse them. He doesn't scream in anger. Instead, he actually echoes the words of Jesus from the cross. First, he prays, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." And then, with his last breath, he actually falls to his knees and shouts, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." He asks for their forgiveness.
And it's that act, dying for what he believed in while asking for forgiveness for his killers, that makes Stephen what we now call the very first Christian martyr. His death is a huge turning point. It's the moment this conflict between the old religious establishment and this new faith turns violent and bloody.
But wait, the story isn't quite over. There's this one seemingly small detail that gets mentioned. As the men are getting ready to throw the stones, they take off their heavy outer coats, so they can move better. And where do they put them? They lay them at the feet of a young man who's just standing there, watching it all happen. His name is Saul.
And the whole account ends with this really chilling line. It says that this man, Saul, approved of what they were doing. He wasn't just some guy watching from the sidelines, he gave his official consent to the execution. And the approval of this one man would kickstart a massive persecution that would scatter this new movement everywhere. But in one of history's greatest ironies, it would also set that very same man on a path that would, believe it or not, completely change the world. And that leaves us with a huge question. How?